It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Thursday, October 24th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that thinks that game against Washington was the textbook definition of a mixed bag.
Yeah, they're a ship taking on water.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter at Locked On Flyers as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. You can find us over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, I think really the thing that I'm coming away with this game against the Caps, the second half of the back-to-back, is that coaching choices are really questionable, I think, from the lineup decisions that are made and then to line choices to matchup decisions. There's just, and it's uncharacteristic in my opinion. It feels like they were generally very good at those things. Now you could talk about Torts and his decisions to bench guys or not bench guys.
Yeah, this is different than that. This is
This
aside
is
from that.
different. This is just basic strategy here. And I usually go to bat for Torts on this show. And I'm genuinely confused by some of what is happening out there. And I felt like we got a lot of mismatches as a result. But what are you?
Yeah, no, I think that too. I mean, I had to tweet it twice. I mean, 2 goals I felt one came with Konecny being out there for 2 minutes and 26 seconds. It's like you can't leave anybody out there that long that even and if it's Konecny that chose that, then you got to put him on the short end of the bench for a few shifts and say, "What are you doing, man?" That cost a goal. And then, Zamula at the end here,
Yeah.
another boneheaded play. Is it all on him? I don't know. We don't know. It seems like it might be. We're going with Darren Pang's word, and that's fine. But in the end, these are all things that sort of add up. And I get it. Look, I said last game I wouldn't play Zamula this game. They played him. They make all these changes. You can't just make sweeping changes every game and expect your team to be cohesive. It's not going to be. You could see somebody said, why do they look so slow? When you have to think a lot, you're a lot slower. When it's instinctive, you're not slower. Those things slow you down. Their defense is a little slow. You got a guy
Yeah.
like Risto back in the lineup, but Risto is not the greatest skater. There's guys that so you have to decide as a team what you want to be. If they want to be this hard to play against defensive team, then you're not going to score a lot of goals. Yeah, you'll score a few being opportunistic. And yes, maybe it'll get you back in the game and you'll make it close. But you're not going to score a lot of goals. Not with this team. You don't have the right guys to play that. And I don't know how many games it will take for Torts to make a change to complement that.
Right. I think, going back to the decision making here, that kicked off this conversation. And, you know, we talk about too many changes can also be a problem. And there,
Absolutely.
our friend Kevin Kurz from The Athletic made a post and they mentioned it on the broadcast where the Flyers prior to this game had 18 different line combinations in this season so far. And that is untenable. And we've talked specifically as it
Yeah.
relates to Matvei Michkov, especially that he needs to build chemistry. And when you're changing up the lines this much, it's going to cause some frustration because people can't anticipate properly. And then secondarily, I would say to your point about shifts going on too long, in addition to that, there was that potential breakaway chance that Noah Cates could have had,
He's dead.
but he was gassed and he couldn't do it. And so either they're calling the line changes on the benches wrong or players are making bad decisions or maybe a combination of
And it
both.
could be both. Those are things we
Yeah.
don't know, and they're not going to be open about it. So, yeah, that stuff looks bad. The other thing is, what kind of game the Capitals play. Like you just played them the night before. So I think they set part of the lineup up to combat against that, but I don't think they fully did. And again, that's why I just think in the end, they are what are we, 7 games into the season, and they don't have any set lines. They don't really have set pairings. That's on the coaching staff.
Yeah, I think that's a problem. Now, like going back to the mixed bag of
Yeah.
it all here, I think Ivan Fedotov is like an example in a nutshell of the mixed bag, right?
Yeah.
Because he made some really terrible plays and just misread things and early on when the Flyers went down 4-0. And then for the rest of the game, like maybe 5 minutes into the second period, for the rest of the game, he was making some unbelievable
He
saves.
was.
And
But I
I
also
just
think the Flyers, and maybe this was the yelling between Torts and Sealer, I think they changed the way they were playing in front of him. They
yeah,
weren't complimenting what he does.
right, and that's exactly what we've been talking about with him, that it's not entirely his fault, it's that the system in front of him was not designed to match his style of play. And I think that is a really important adjustment that I think maybe they're on the right path here. So I think that's a good thing. I think Owen Tippett finally scoring is a very important thing because he needed to get on the board desperately.
Yeah, no question. We'll see if there's a carryover effect for him. I mean, Travis Konecny, he's in these last 2 games, he's just playing dumb hockey. He really is. Even that
Staying
one.
loose for
No,
sure.
he's playing dumb. He's playing undisciplined. He let Tom Wilson basically rule him and pull him into penalties. He also, I felt like there was a scoring chance. I don't know. I think it was late in the second, and he just was casually shooting the puck like it was at practice. Like he just, and I was just like, wow, where that's what you're going to shoot. That's how you're doing it. It was a weird. These last couple of games for him have not been what you expect from him.
Yeah, I think that's true to some degree. I think he's frustrated. I think they're all frustrated. And, I said this at the end of the game. At least they're angry and not resigned. I think that is a good sign that at least they know that there's something wrong here and they're
Yeah,
going to
they
fight
haven't quit
back.
on the coach like some people were tweeting to me. That's not the case here.
No, they
That's
have
not
not
what's
quit at
happening here.
all.
No, that's
Yeah.
not
So
the
I
issue.
think I think that is a good thing. I think, the special teams continue to be a good thing. 2 for 4 on the power play, 3 for 3 on the penalty kill. That is very important. Obviously, the empty net side of things plays a little questionable, but
Yeah,
and makes me so annoyed when Ovi gets an empty net goal because I feel like it's cheating. But anyway,
he's got more than
um,
Gretzky, but I'm not going to pull that. It's
I
fine.
know,
Whatever happens,
I
happens.
know.
At the end of the day, they're at the bottom of the at the conference for a reason. They've earned
Yeah,
this record. They have.
yeah. When you say they, you mean the Flyers,
Yes, the Flyers, not the
not
Capitals.
the Caps. But, I think Matvei Michkov, multi-point game
Yeah, it's a
again. I
terrific
think
game for him. Although
yeah,
he made a
he's
bad mistake too. He did. And that's something where, again, this is where there's going to be a language barrier. He didn't know what was going on the ice, and that was part of what was happening with Sealer too. And Sealer
mhm,
didn't kind of like know what to do because he didn't recognize it. They know that
yeah,
stuff's going to happen. Like it's just going to
yep.
happen. Like you have to deal with it.
But I thought it was a great move to get the puck to Lawton for that quality chance.
Yeah.
The assist on the Konechny goal on the power play was really
Hmm.
good. I love his choice on the 4-on-3 to shoot instead of make another pass. Like, his
Yep.
decision making on the power play is just second to none, and it is such a joy to watch him
No,
do it.
it is. It's a great skill. It's a skill a lot of the other Flyers don't have. If they had another 1 or 2 guys that could do that, the power play would be dangerous.
Ryan Poehling, what a rough game for him physically. I certainly
Yeah.
hope he's okay with that block shot that
Frost
was
too.
really
Frost
tough.
got hurt physically.
Well,
Tippett
yeah,
got he was hurt running into the net. These guys are banged up.
yeah, Morgan Frost, though, besides maybe getting hurt, had a frustrating game. And I know, we all have a little bit of a reaction to that because
No, no,
we have
oh,
this.
there's more than a reaction. This is the problem with him. This is what he
No, no, no,
can't
no,
do.
no. That's
This
not
is
what
what
I'm
I'm
talking
hearing.
about at all.
Okay, what are you talking
But
about?
the reaction I'm talking about is knowing that John Tortorella is very quick to bench him, and the reaction to, "Oh god, he's gonna get benched, and that's not a good idea."
Yeah,
Reaction.
well, that reaction wasn't coming up much on my end. Mine was he has to bury that.
Oh,
Yeah, he has to bury that wraparound. Well, my opinion was, yes, okay. But you know how many other Flyers missed wraparounds this year? Like, I think Lawton's the only one that's hit on it.
mhm.
So,
Well, we talked about that on our mailbag.
we
Low
did.
percentage low percentage
And they
shots,
keep
very
going
low.
for it. So it's like, yeah, I'm not taking Frost off the hook, but I'm just saying, Frost also had a great breakaway. Is anybody else on the team getting a breakaway like that in that game? No. And Thompson had to make, an amazing save. They thought it was
But
a goal.
yeah. Yeah, I think
So I'm
Konechny
not
had
mad at Morgan Frost.
something,
I'm
but
not,
no, I'm not either. But I think that, there'll be a little bit more of a spotlight on him from coach for sure
for
after
sure.
that. I think that, onward to the next back to back against the Wild and Montreal. We're going to preview those tomorrow, but I don't know if this is fortuitous or a harbinger, but we decided to do our Draft 101 episode for today's show. So we're
Before
going
the
to
outcome of this game, like we had no idea what was
no
happening.
idea, but a lot of James Hagens talk on the timeline, and we are talking about him and the approach to looking at prospects and how we approach our draft coverage. We're going to start that coming up next.
Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, forget having to have dozens of tabs open. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And there's so much more action besides the NFL. With the NHL season underway, there are so many options for hockey fans. FanDuel has daily specials like total home team goals for the day, highest scoring game, fastest goal scored, and more. I'll still give you a football bet. Go with the Bears over the Commanders. Take the money line. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com.
On tomorrow's show, we will be previewing the weekend matchup between the Flyers and the Minnesota Wild, as well as the second half of that back to back against the Montreal Canadiens. Again, two back to backs this week. Complained about it for our nemesis of the week. Torts also complained about it too. So I feel
Shocking.
more justified in my complaint about it as a nemesis
So you
here.
complain as much as a 74-year-old man. Congratulations to you.
Listen, we do what we can, right? I am very excited about this part of our show today because obviously, with Russ being a draft prospect expert, that is your bread and butter. Every year, we do a little kickoff to start our coverage for the next year's draft. And we get started a little early because it's never too soon. And given that Russ knows a lot of these prospects inside and out, we want to talk about as many of them as we can over the course of the season. And we always do a little kickoff in terms of, how do you do draft prospect coverage? What is your approach? So, um, just in case there's listeners out there who aren't familiar with your background or weren't around for last year's show, like what's your general process for scouting and compiling data for your rankings?
Right. So I've been at this since my first draft was 2001. Uh, it took me a while to kind of get where I am now. So shortly after I joined Hockey Prospect Radio, was on that for 15 years. Shane Malloy is still on it. He taught me a lot. And so, the process has changed over the years because now I have more things available to me. At the beginning, in the dark ages, video was hard to come by. Just seeing games in the United States were hard to come by. So now it's a little easier. But the way I do it is I always kick off the year with the USHL Fall Classic, and that gives me a good basis of guys to watch because every team plays. It's kind of like the frenzy that happened in the NHL, but for more days. And because they each play 2 games, it gives me an idea of guys to follow for the rest of the year in that league. Now, the only thing is, every once in a while, guys will parachute into that league, middle of the season, whatever, and I got to keep up with that too. Uh, Now, the international tournaments help me a lot because whether I go or just watch, because I'm watching guys a lot of times for 2 years from now, a year from now. So, like, even the 5 nations that I went to 2 years ago, Anton Frundell is a draft pick who played then now. Eklund's brother played then. And so I was able to, so I have data going back 2 years on these guys. So that helps me because what I always do is compare my notes. Like, what did the guy look like then? What does the guy
Right.
look like now? Taking into consideration how the season's going, how his team's going. Is he injured? Was he injured then? You know, all those things. I put all those things kind of in my head and write everything down, have notes. So this way I could write about these guys during the year. I could talk about them on the show. You know, I put it on NHL Draft Buzz. I put it up on EP Ringside, all these different places, some on Twitter. And so this is, you know, how I do it throughout the year. I'll probably go to a tournament and maybe I'll go to the CHL tournament in November. It's either that or the World Juniors. I haven't really decided which I'm going to go to yet. So one of those I'll watch, one of those I'll go to in person. And so that helps me too. And, you know, along the way, I get to see other scouts. I do trade some ideas and stuff. I don't try and let them influence me too much, but it's good to, you know, talk to other people too.
Yeah, and then you just kind of build that
I build
data
it.
over the course of the year. And
Yeah.
one thing I really love, I mean, a
Not on
lot
a
of
nice
people
spreadsheet like yours, though. I don't have those skills.
We'll
It's
we'll
not
get to
that,
my spreadsheet,
it doesn't
but
look that good. It doesn't.
yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate the vote of confidence there on my spreadsheet skills, but I think that one of the things that I appreciate about your process and how you go about it is I know a lot of people do like first rankings, second rankings, third rankings, but the kind of things that go into what changes between the rankings, the way you approach that, I think is really, really solid in terms of you're not going to move somebody like a big swath. Like there's in a
Right.
month, somebody can't change from like 10 to 4 or
Right.
something like that. They can over 6 months, but
Yes.
not in a short incremental. And so I appreciate that you're like really, I think, a little conservative with moving people around too much, like that I see in some other places.
Yeah, no, I am conservative, and sometimes, like up at the top, I'm stubborn. When I've sort of look at it, I've made up my mind. It's going to take a lot. Like Matthew Kachuk, I had him, not Matthew Kachuk, Brady Kachuk. I had him second. I never moved him, and
Right.
just like that was just something I was just sold on him. So that's, you know, that does happen. Also, I also look at the one thing I kind of do that I don't think others do is I try and talk to as many of these players as possible,
I
and
was gonna say,
so I kind of, you know, can get in their head and see who they are as people, what they do on the ice. And look, I cheat. I ask players about other players. I mean, that helps me.
that's not cheating at all.
Yeah.
That is being resourceful,
Yeah.
Russ.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that because I think that's an aspect that a lot of other people that just look at tape don't
Yeah.
get into. And I think you can learn a lot from teammates. You can
Yes.
learn a lot from themselves in terms of what they think they have to work on versus what other people think they need to work on. And all of those things go into a good draft rankings. And that's why I really appreciate how you go about it.
Well, thanks.
Looking at this year's draft class, just obviously the 2025 draft is a long way away in hockey terms, but just, from a big picture perspective, do you think it's more forward heavy or D heavy so
I
far?
think it's more forward heavy in the top 10. And then once you get to the top 20, you know, I could see somewhere from like 8, 9, 10 defensemen in the top 20. So that's my sort of breakdown of it. So, you know, I think at the top of the draft, it's going to be centers. There's a couple of centers, you know, we'll talk about one of them.
Interesting. The Flyers and centers.
Yeah. Um, So yeah, I mean, and if you're a Flyers fan, you're not going to say, "Well, look, we got Jet Luchenko. We don't need any more centers." Well, you will, because Sean Couturier is aging before your eyes, and you don't know who else will
Always
be
could use
there,
center.
right? Uh, And ultimately, you want a situation like the Devils have with, Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes. They got Nico Hischier.
Right.
He was the number one. They were like, okay, we're pretty happy with this. Then they got Jack Hughes, and it's like, okay, Nico's a really good number two now. Like there's no shame in
And
that.
then
So
Nico got better.
right,
So,
and he did. And so, like, if that
right.
happens with the Flyers, if Jetlachenko turns into a second line center, fine. If your top line center is that good that they can make Jetlachenko a second, you're doing okay. So I do
I would
always
say
want to
so.
point that out.
Yeah. Are there any good goalies? I feel like it's been a while since there's been a superstar goalie available in the draft.
Yeah, Joshua Ravensbergen's probably the guy, but I haven't done a lot of goalie work. With him, I had to do some simply because we already did a list on EP, and I don't even do my list until usually end of November or sometime in November. So it's coming, but not yet. So yeah, I think it's him, and I think he's the only first round goalie. Could something change? Maybe, but probably not. Every team is conservative now about taking a goalie in the first round. If you go look,
Yeah.
historically, there haven't been many. So, and Carter Hart did not go in the first round, as you know, right?
Right.
So, that's where kind of teams are at. So, the only team that will take even him, even Joshua, is a team that doesn't have a franchise goalie, or they have a franchise goalie that's aging, one or the other. That's the team that will say, all right, you know what? We've got to get bold here. Like, perfect example, Shane's going to be sick of me saying this, but they asked me in Jake Ottinger's draft, does he go first round or not? And I said, yes. And Shane said no. And it's like, all right, but he did. And, we both loved him. I mean, there was no question he was going to
Right.
be a
It's
really
just a
good
matter
goalie.
of when he goes. Right.
Right. And Dallas obviously made the right decision for Dallas, right? Because they kept, they had a bunch of goalies. So it's going to be a team like that will end up taking them.
So as far as like a general draft strategy, when all things are equal in terms of skill, do you go with size? And does that give a guy an edge in your rankings?
Size can get an edge if it's truly all things equal. That's the harder part to say, is when that is occurring. But yeah, if I've got a 5'10" center or a 6'2" center, and I think they're going to accomplish the same thing in the NHL, then yeah, I'm going to take the 6'2" center. But I don't look down at the 5'10" center, because I'm 5'9". That's part of the reason. But but I don't look down on that guy. It's just there does, like, again, I was not anti-size for Jack Hughes, and I think that's that's worked itself out. So I think it's the same thing with this draft. James Hagens is what, 5'10" and a half, something like that. His
Yeah.
brother's taller, so maybe he'll grow a little, maybe he won't. But if he's at the top of the draft and I'm drafting at the top of the draft, well, then I got him and maybe Roger McQueen, and those are the two centers that I probably look at the top of the draft and say, okay, now I got to look at these two and see if I really am going for the size. The spoiler alert is I probably wouldn't in that
Right.
situation.
Right. So I think one of the other interesting trends is that I think in the past people kind of focused on, we want the January, February birthdays, right?
Right.
Because they're going to be bigger, and the data says that coaches pay more attention to them in their development because they're the older, better kids in their youth divisions and all of that. But I feel like the tide is sort of shifting a little bit to get the younger players in a draft class because it gives you more runway in their development. Like, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I see more of the young runway guys going.
Like
Luchenko
Jetlutchenko,
is
for
one of
instance.
them. Yep. If he wasn't the youngest guy in his draft, he was like second youngest. It was something like
Mhm.
that. And so, yes, that is something that is an asset to him because he has more time. The downside is if he doesn't make the NHL, he's going to have to play in juniors a little longer, but maybe not for long. Maybe Jetlutchenko goes to a college and goes a year and collects
You
NIL
can do
money.
that now.
You could do that now. So these are things that may change the game a little bit in that regard. But I still think the guys with runway are guys that are they're shooting for the overagers. They tend to use for middle of the draft kind of
Right.
stuff. Guys that have been passed over, and some of them make it. Perinovich is playing in the league.
All right. Well, you mentioned James Hagens. We are going to talk more about him specifically as kind of example of how Russ does his methodology and how we scout prospects for the draft, plus talk a little bit about how the Flyers should approach this upcoming draft. We are going to do that coming up next. Some of the best concerts of the year take place in the fall, and it's my favorite time to head to a show. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. My favorite part of the Game Time app is that it's great for getting notified about last minute super deals so you know you're getting the best bang for your buck. Best of all, they have all in pricing, so there's no surprise fees at checkout when you activate that feature. Also, tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through email. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time.
Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off? Which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks invented the flex pay, which means you can still cash out of your lineup if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. And Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money as quick as 15 minutes. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNHL on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5 Prize Picks. Run your game.
All right. So before we talk about James Hagens a little bit, I want to talk about the Flyers strategy specifically because Flyers have 3 first round picks currently, and a ton of picks overall in this upcoming draft. We're looking at a lot of assets here for the Flyers, and I wonder, like, is it worth it in this draft based on what you know to keep all of those picks, or do you think it's worthwhile for them to maybe trade one of them to get a player that they can use now?
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile to trade one of them to get a player. Uh, that's where you could sort of play around with. Well, let's see where these picks end up. Like some of their, some were there, some were not. Right. So uh, if they turn this season around, then maybe you trade that pick because it's not going to be a higher pick. So it depends. I'll keep the higher ones. I'll trade the lower one, or I'll keep the highest one, trade the second highest one, depending on the type of player, and then get that other one. So that's possible. Now, again, cap situation as it is, everything else, they'll have a little bit that drops off. So it really kind of depends on
Well, the
the
Cal
player.
Peterson money is gonna drop
Right.
off, so
Right.
that'll be big.
So yeah, if they're looking for a defenseman, let's say, and the team knows they can't sign a guy, if you're going to do it, you got to do it with at least 2 to 3 years term on it. If you don't, because you are rebuilding, it doesn't make sense.
I think that, it will be interesting to see what the Flyers strategy is. It'll be interesting to see if any of the picks they have will be involved in any trade deadline deals, and some of this conversation will be moot. I think that's entirely possible as well, especially some of the later round picks, some of
Right.
the second rounders, maybe. So I doubt they'll trade away a first rounder at trade deadline this year. That seems absolutely bonkers. But
No, it would probably
stranger
happen
things have happened. But
yeah, I think it would happen at the draft. I
or
don't think
like
it would.
trade 2 of the first rounders to move up to a higher first rounder,
I mean, they're going
maybe.
to try that, but again, the
Yeah.
Boston Bruins thought, "Hey, we've got 3 picks in a row, we're
They'll
going to
never live that down. Never.
yeah, we're going to trade up and we're going to, and they were going after Noah Hannafin, they didn't get him. Most of the time those efforts fail. Danny Briere will talk about it. The fans will get excited about it. But just so everybody understands, most of the time those efforts fail.
I agree. All right, James Hagens. So when we take a look at a prospect here, we kind of give a background on him to start off with. Where's he at now? What's his current game look like? And then talk a little bit about what they need to work on, how he'd potentially fit with the Flyers, and kind of where they're ranked. And so James Hagens is currently the presumptive first overall pick. Chances of the Flyers having an opportunity for that to be determined
Right.
based on what we know now. But as Russ said, he's a center. He's a little smaller. He's 5'10". He's a really good two-way player. Has that U.S. national team development program background. And I think he kind of, burst onto the scene in terms of making himself known to a wider audience at last year's U18s, where he had 9 goals and 13 assists for 22 points in 7 games at the tournament. He was the tournament MVP. And I think he turned a lot of heads there, right?
He did. There's no question he turned heads. I watched him in, World Junior Camp, and he was as good as anybody there, honestly. He I was watching him for 2 years, as an underager, and he was just bringing it. And there's just any team he's been on, he's been the best guy. The motor's great, the brain is great. As far as the psychological makeup of him, he's, a Long Island kid. So I kind of
Yep.
understand that mentality. His mom's a great cook. So him and his brother used to raid the fridge. I think she's Italian, so did have their good Italian food. There's a lot of Italian food on Long Island, like there is in Philly. That's one thing those areas have in common. So, he played a lot of hockey. He played against his brother. His brother's a defenseman. So that really kind of helped him, even as, I think his brother, I'm looking it up, I think he's an inch taller. So there is room for him he's an inch taller. So he could get to 5'11" again. But the thing was, when he would tell me that he would go up against his older brother, that's a big deal. Like, that's somebody where
Right.
you're out on the ice, you can now like challenge him and do that. They've been working out with other Long Island guys, pretty sure, like Matthew Coronado, who's up with the Calgary Flames, guys like that. All those guys in different areas. You get the Hugheses that seem to go back to the Michigan area, and they all work out together. There's a Long Island crew too, and so he's a part of that, and he's been doing that for years, and that kind of stuff rubs off, on a younger player. So yeah, he'll be a star at the World Juniors. He,
Right.
he has star potential. He's got terrific speed. He is really good on faceoffs. Like, I understand he's a
Yes.
smaller center, but he understands the technique of it. His hands are fast. That's a part of it.
Right. And I was actually looking at his current faceoff stats. He's a first year player at Boston College now, and he's playing 2C right now on a line with your pal Teddy Siga, who's one of your
Yeah, I
favorites.
like Teddy. Yeah,
Which I saw that. I was like, oh, all right. He's got a goal and 4 assists in 5 games, so pretty good. But he is definitely above 50% on faceoffs, and for a first year
in
2C
college, and yeah.
in college, I think that's pretty good.
No, it's good. And, yeah, I knew him and Seeger would be at the school together. It's nice that they're on the same line. But the interesting thing is, we're now seeing a big influx, much more than before, of like freshmen that actually make a difference in college. It's hard to, because some of these players are 23 years old that you're going up against on other teams. So the fact that, yeah, he's doing that well doesn't surprise me. Like, this kid raises his level all the time. So I wouldn't want to hear a Flyers fan say, we don't need him, he's smaller. I wouldn't want to hear Danny Briere say, well, we've got other guys like him. If you do that, I think you're being foolish.
Yeah, I think, when you're looking at the presumptive first overall pick, that's who you take no matter what. And I think the Flyers even understand that.
Yeah, they do.
Going back to like taking Nolan Patrick, at 2, because that's who the presumptive 2 was. So they
Yep.
did it.
Yep.
So I think that at that level, the Flyers like would do the right thing. Absolutely. I think he would fit in, like you said, in terms
Mhm.
of like, great if he's better than Jet Luchenko, and those
Right.
are
You
our
let them
top 2
battle it
centers.
out. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and they do bring a slightly different game. I think,
they do.
Luchenko, I think they both have a good two-way game, but I think Hagens is more offensively driven a
It is.
little bit. So I think they would balance each other out pretty
Like, his
well.
zone entries are already better than Jet Luchenko's. That's no slight to
Mhm.
Jet. That's just one of his gifts.
Yeah, I watched him a lot at U18s and, like, what a great player to
It's
watch.
hard to cover him. Like, it's a
Yeah.
lot like Jack Hughes in that way. He is hard to cover, and when he gets
His
his
puck protection is
oh, yeah.
really good.
He knows
Really
how to
good.
do it, and you never see him get plastered, like,
Nope.
getting hit badly because it's hard to keep up with him. His edge work is tremendous.
Yeah. So I think that, he would be a really good fit in the Flyers rebuild in terms of the timing.
Yeah,
I think it would be, hopefully the Flyers turn it around. So it would be a miracle if they had the first overall pick, but on the slight off chance that they
sure.
do, let's go for it there. But this
I
is
mean,
something we'll
the
revisit.
biggest thing the biggest thing not to cut you off, sorry. The biggest thing is when you're looking at something like this is, like, you look at the Flyers now, and you could see where Matvei Michkov, his future skill level is above everybody else on the team. Nobody's close. Even Travis Konecny is not close.
Yeah.
And so, like, when you could get a player like that, you have to get them.
You absolutely do. All right. Well, this is the kind of draft content you'll be getting over the course of this season. We usually take a look at a prospect on Thursdays, kind of alternating with checking in on our Flyers prospects out there. So looking forward to that. I'll get the spreadsheet set up and we'll talk about that the next time around when we talk about a draft prospect. We'll be back tomorrow again to talk Minnesota Wild and Montreal Canadiens. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. Let us know your questions on Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey, become a fantasy hockey expert, and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.